The story I'm about to tell you is, I promise you, not an easy one to listen to. It's not particularly easy to tell. But I promise you that everything I'm telling you is firsthand and true. I know from experience, and in a crowd this size, it is inevitable that there are people in this crowd who have been personally touched by abortion. Please understand, there's no condemnation from me. I'm the last person in this room to condemn anyone. I want you to imagine for a minute that you're an obstetrician gynecologist like me. And I want you to imagine for a minute that you're a pro-choice obstetrician gynecologist like I used to be. Your patient today is 17 years old. She's 20 weeks pregnant. Her uterus is all the way up to her umbilicus. If you could see her baby, and that's easy on an ultrasound, her baby would be the length of your hand, from the tip of your middle finger to your wrist. That's head to rump, not counting the legs, a 20-week baby. She's been feeling her baby kick for 2 weeks, but now she's asleep on an operating room table, and you're there to help her with her problem. You walk into the operating room scrubbed and gowned, and there's instruments to the side. The first thing you reach for is a suction catheter. I know this is a big room, but this is a 14 French suction catheter. It's clear plastic. And picture yourself, if you can, putting this up into the cervix, into the uterus, and you instruct your circulating nurse to turn on the suction. And what you'll see is pale yellow fluid running through the tubing into the machine. That was the amniotic fluid that was there to protect the baby. Now, if she were only 12 weeks pregnant or less, a 12-week baby is the width of your hand from head to rump, you could pretty much do the whole abortion with this one procedure, or this one instrument. Baby's this big. They don't fit through catheters this size. So put that down and reach for your sofa clamp. So you don't have to imagine it. I brought one along. It's 13 inches long. It's stainless steel. The business end is about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide. There are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. A second trimester D&E abortion is a blind procedure the way I did it. You can use an ultrasound, frankly, it doesn't help. And I did it all by feel. So picture yourself taking this instrument, put it up into the cervix. Be very careful not to perforate the uterus. It's very easy to do because the walls are thin and soft. And just grab a hold of anything you can blindly and pull. Feel yourself pulling, and I do mean hard. And out pops a leg about that big, which you put down on the table next to you. Reach in again, grasp, pull, hard. Out comes an arm, the same length, which you put down on the table next to you. And reach in with this clamp again and again and tear out the spine, the intestines, the heart and lungs. Head on a baby that age is about the size of a plum. Can't see it, of course, but you'll know pretty sure you've got it if your instrument's around something and your fingers are spread as far as they'll go. You know you did it right. If you crush down on the instrument, white material runs out of the cervix. That was the baby's brains. Now you can pull out skull pieces. Sometimes the little face comes back and stares back at you. Congratulations. You just successfully performed a second trimester D&E abortion. You just affirmed her right to choose. You just made the equivalent in today's dollars of over $2,000 legally in 15 minutes. Now, I graduated from medical school in 1976, and if you asked me how I felt about the abortion issue, I would not have hesitated for a second to tell you I was pro-choice. This is a choice between a woman, her doctor, and no one, including the baby's father, had anything to say about it. You know, a lot of people identify themselves as pro-life or pro-choice. For some people, it doesn't directly affect their lives. It doesn't even affect how they vote. But when you're an obstetrician gynecologist and you say you're pro-choice, this isn't some vague political position. You have to decide whether you're going to actually do those procedures. So right along with learning how to do deliveries and hysterectomies and all the stuff that obstetrician gynecologists do, I learned to do abortions. There was a clinic that met in the hospital twice a week at the time, late 70s. And if patients were 12 to 13 weeks from their last period or less, we'd bring them in for suction D&C abortions. Now, we have medical abortions today. We didn't have those then, but still the majority of first trimester abortions are done by suction D&C. And when it was my turn to do them, believe it or not, we did them in the delivery room. I'd do 3, 4, 5 in the morning, never thought anything of it. If they were more than 13 weeks pregnant, we'd make them wait several weeks and we'd bring them in for saline abortions, for second trimester abortions. These aren't done anymore, but suffice it to say these women had to go through labor and it would take anywhere from 8 to 36 hours for them to deliver their usually dead children. But hey, I'm pro-choice. And I'm there to learn to be an obstetrician gynecologist. And every doctor, abortionist or not, wants the same thing: happy, healthy patients. It was in my first year of training that I went down to the cafeteria one night for a break, and an attractive young lady came and sat next to me who was to become my wife in a year, little did I know. And we started dating and found out very quickly we were on opposite sides of this issue. New York legalized abortion 3 years before Roe versus Wade, 1970. They've had abortion for over 50 years now. And when my wife was in her training program, she was asked, we want to know if you'd be willing to assist these procedures. And she said, no way. She wanted no part of it. And she wasn't getting into obstetrics. She went into renal transplants. And that was the end of it as far as she was concerned until we met. But as I said, pretty quickly, we found out we were opposite sides. And we made the earliest, first, and dumbest mistake you can ever make in a relationship. Instead of talking about it, hashing it out, coming to some kind of resolution, we ignored it. And that set up a pattern that lasted far too long. We got married, and like many young couples, we wanted to have children of our own, but found out very quickly we had an infertility problem. She was just not getting pregnant. I sent her to the best infertility specialist in town. Any woman who's been to an infertility clinic or an infertility doctor knows that it is difficult, painful, embarrassing. And she would come home from those appointments, lock herself in the bathroom and cry because 2 ironies were not lost on her. First, here she is married to an obstetrician gynecologist, she can't get pregnant. Second, here she is trying to have a baby and her husband's killing babies as part of his work. But as soon as that thought came in, she'd push it out as soon as possible. Her doctor came to us and said, there's one more procedure I can try. It should take an hour and a half. And when he walked out of the operating room 4.5 hours later, he came up to me and said, look, I never tell anyone they're not going to have a baby of their own, but don't count on it. The odds are way against you. We were devastated. We wanted a family. So, okay, we'll adopt a baby. No problem. Anybody tried to adopt a baby and finds out how quickly and how difficult that is? We went to religious agencies. We went to state agencies. We went to county agencies. The best we could do after months of effort was to get on a 5-year waiting list to get on the actual waiting list. And it was during this time that I had my first doubts about abortion. They were strictly selfish. I'm doing these abortions in the day, and then at night I'm trying to find one more number to call to see if I can't find a baby to get. And I remember literally thinking, I'm just throwing these kids in the garbage. I mean, wouldn't even one of these women allow us to take her baby home and care for her as our own? But of course it doesn't work that way. It was then that I got what my wife still credits as the best idea I've ever gotten in our entire marriage, except my asking her to marry me. And that was, this is stupid. We're getting nowhere with the normal channels. I know 50 obstetricians on a first name basis. Let's advertise. Let them know that we're looking for a baby, and maybe we'll get lucky and some baby will fall between the cracks and we can get a private adoption. So we did. And months after that, in August of 1978, I was working in the operating room, and the circulating nurse tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked up, and she was holding up a piece of paper that said, call Marcia as soon as you're done. Marcia was the head of social services at our hospital, and she's one of the people that we had talked to. It's all the note said, but I knew what it meant, and sure enough, when I called her, she informed me there was a 15-year-old girl in labor in the delivery room. She'd had no prenatal care. First time she saw a doctor was the day before. But she was healthy, the baby looked good. She wants to give her baby up for adoption. Are you interested? Well, of course I was interested. I remember staring at the face of the telephone to call my wife with this news and know that I was just 7 digits away from becoming a father. And literally, by the grace of God, we were able to adopt a little girl that we named Heather in August of 1978. Fantastic. We've got a baby. And after all the years, and after all the tears, and after all the doubts, we had a baby of our own, and my wife got pregnant the very next month. And our son Sean was born in August of 1979. Well, Sean and Heather were figuratively and literally close. They were only 10 months apart. Anybody who didn't know Heather had been adopted would look at the two of them and go, 10 months apart? Man, you didn't give your wife much of a break. I've got the proverbial millionaire's family now. I got a son and a daughter. And any doubts I had about abortion simply evaporated, and I went back to business as usual. Graduated from my residency in 1980. We went to the west coast of Florida. Found out pretty quick that a young couple with young kids didn't belong in a retirement community, so we left and went back to upstate New York, and I set up practice with another physician. Now, understand, we weren't running an abortion clinic. This is a regular OBGYN office like probably every woman in this room has been to. But abortion was a part of what we did. And Bill and I were practiced abortionists. And at the time, 1981, those of us in the abortion industry were looking for a better method of second trimester abortion, those late-term abortions that were being done up to 24 weeks. And those saline abortions were difficult, extremely difficult on patients, difficult on staff, dangerous, expensive because of the prolonged hospital stay. We wanted a method of later abortion that was like D&C. We wanted a method where the patient would go to sleep, and when she woke up, it would all be over. And that's when D&E abortions were just being developed. As I said, there are dozens of obstetrician gynecologists in Albany who would do abortions, but none of them would touch that procedure. And we saw an opportunity. So we trained ourselves to do these late-term D&E abortions. As you know, and we were getting referrals from other doctors to take care of their patients to do that procedure. Over the next 4 years, I did 1,200 abortions. Over 100 were the D&E abortions that I described. But hey, life's good. You know, the kids are growing, we're finally making some money, we can afford a house, we can afford some furniture, and everything was just lovely until June 23rd, 1984. June 23rd was a Saturday, beautiful day in Albany. I was on call, but it wasn't too busy. Made rounds and got to spend the rest of the day with my family. We took the kids to an amusement park that afternoon, had dinner together, and that evening the kids were playing in the backyard. We had friends come over for cake and coffee. And we were talking with our friends, and at 7:25 that night, we heard the screech of brakes out in front of the house. Kids had gone in the road. Heather had been hit by a car. She was a mess. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to be able to save people's lives. My wife is an intensive care nurse. This is our work. We did everything we could, and she literally died in our arms in the back of an ambulance. If you have kids, you may think you have some idea of what that might be like. If you haven't been through this yourself, you have no clue. I hope you never find out. What do you do after a disaster? You bury your child, you take some time off, and then you try to get into your life again. And I don't know how long it was after Heather's death, but I showed up at OR number 9 at Albany Medical Center just like I had over 100 times before for a second trimester D&E abortion. I wasn't thinking of this as anything special. It was routine. I had other things on my mind. So I walked into that operating room, and I took that clamp, and I put it up in the uterus, and I pulled out an arm or a leg, and I just stared at it in the clamp, and I got sick. You know something, though? When you start an abortion, you can't stop. You have to finish the procedure, because if you don't get 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces, your patient will come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I finished that abortion, and I know it sounds strange to people, but I promised you earlier that everything I'm telling you is firsthand and true. For the first time in my career, after all those years and all those abortions, I looked. I mean, I really, really looked at that pile of body parts on the side of the table. I didn't see her wonderful right to choose. I didn't see what a great doctor I was helping her with a problem. And I didn't even see the $2,000 I just made in 15 minutes. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter. And this looked very different to me. And it occurred to me in that moment that this patient had come to me figuratively, never literally, and said, would be the equivalent in today's dollars, and said, here's $2,000, kill my son or daughter. And I was the kind of person that would look her straight in the eye with no compunction at all, say, sure, I'll do that. Of course, we were in a crisis. I told you earlier that we had decided early on not to talk about the abortion issue. The problem with that in a relationship is when you find it's easy to skip one important topic, you start skipping talking about other important topics. And we'd been drifting apart. Now with Heather's death, it all broke wide open. We were grieving separately. I didn't stop doing abortions. I knew why I felt bad. I'll get over this. But my wife always knew when I had abortions scheduled the next day because I was an absolute bear to be around. I was angry. See, and I got into a blame game. You see, it's the girl's fault for getting pregnant. It's the hospital's fault for allowing them. It's the nurse's fault for scheduling it. Of course, it's everybody else's fault but me. Isn't that always the way it is? And after a few months of that, she'd had it up to here, and unbeknownst to me, she'd packed a bag, and she was 5 minutes away from walking out of the house with my son. But now understand something. She's full-blooded Irish, I'm full-blooded Sicilian. We could have some great discussions at times. And she was not going to walk out of the house without having her say. And she let me have it. You know something? It's not the girl's fault. It's not the hospital's fault. And it's not the nurse's fault. You stupid idiot. If you feel so bad about this, why don't you just quit? That was the opening salvo in what turned into an hour-and-a-half conversation the first time we actually talked about what I'd been doing. And the next day I went to my partners and I told them I would no longer do these second trimester D&E abortions. It was just too painful. I'll just do the little ones, the suction D&Cs we were doing in the office. And for a few months I soldiered on doing those. I know people look up to physicians. You think we're so smart. We're no different than anyone else. When you finally figure out here, not here, that killing a baby this big for money is wrong, it doesn't take you too long to figure out that it doesn't matter if the baby is this big or this big or this big or even this big. It's all the same. And it was February of 1985 that I finally went to my partners a second time. I'm ashamed to say it was that long. And told them that I would no longer do any more abortions. And I never did another one after that. You're being kind, but what did I just say? Yeah. Was it some great religious awareness? No. It was selfish. I hurt. I quit. It was that simple. There was nothing noble about it. Stop doing abortions? That's why I quit. Get involved in the pro-life movement? Not a chance. You see, everyone in the abortion industry knows that every pro-lifer is a kook. I know this because CNN tells me so, and they would never lie to me. God had his own plans. Took us a long time to realize it. Months after I stopped doing abortions, in November of 1985, we got invited, somebody in our church invited us to a pro-life potluck dinner, and I laughed. And it was on a Friday night. I had an easy out. We had another engagement. But, and I literally said, why would I want to go to some pro-life potluck dinner with a bunch of kooks? As it happened coincidentally, and see, I understand coincidences now, the pro-life potluck dinner was on the road to where we were going. We had to go by it to get there. And we were driving to this other thing, and I looked at my wife and I said, you know what, just for giggles, let's stop at the pro-life potluck dinner. We'll walk in, maybe stay 10 minutes and get out of there. So that night, the ex-abortionist and his wife walked into a pro-life potluck dinner. It looked like a scene in a bad movie. Everybody looked up and the place went dead quiet. I had no idea these people knew who I was, but they did. And a lot of them didn't know I wasn't doing abortions anymore. I didn't take out an ad, I just quit. Well, we ended up spending an hour and a half at the pro-life potluck dinner. Guess what? These people weren't kooks. They understood the medicine, they understood the law. They were giving their time voluntarily and sacrificially to stop what they saw as one of the worst human rights abuses of our time. This really impressed us, and we joined this group. It was called Citizens Concerned for Human Life in Albany, New York. And it was sometime after that that I started speaking. It's easy to look at the abortion issue and be intimidated. It's huge. And it's easy to sit there and say, yeah, all right, great. You know, he's a doctor, she's a nurse. What's that got to do with me? I'm a mom, I take care of my kids. I work for the post office. I'm an accountant. I have nothing to do with medicine. How can I make a difference? I mean this sincerely. How many people in this room honestly, sincerely believe they could do anything with God behind them? Yeah, look at the hands. Now I'm going to challenge you to start acting that way. And that's why we're here today. 1983. Oh, and let me tell you something else, quickly. You are never going to change a doctor's mind by standing outside their office or clinic and screaming murderer at them. It doesn't work. You need a relationship. 1983. I'm still doing abortions. I arrive at my office and I see something that no abortionist wants to see. The local Christian crazies are picketing my office. And people ask all the time, what's it like? What's it like, inside when we're outside picketing the office? So I'll tell you what it's like. It's us against you kooks outside. It gives you a siege mentality. And it was at that time that I got a new patient. Her name was Susan. She was in her mid-30s. She barely came up to my shoulders. And she came in for a routine GYN and pap smear. No big deal. When it was over, she said, can I talk to you? Now, doctors in the room will know this is not unusual. A lot of patients, and I think especially women, will not tell you what's really on their mind until they develop some level of trust. So I sit down very professionally, look at this lady and say, how can I help you? And she completely blows me away when she says, I've been sent here to give you a message that Jesus loves you. He cares about you. This is not what he had intended for your life to be an abortionist. Please stop. Now, understand something. It's not like my wife and I never darkened the inside of a church before. But people that were very demonstrative about their faith always made me uncomfortable. And I had one overwhelming thought when this lady said this. And it was, I got to hustle this kook out of my office as fast as I could, and I did. A year later, she showed up for her next OGYN exam pap smear. When it was over, she says, can I talk to you? I went, oh, no. I remembered what she said. And I told you, a relationship. Doctors listen to their patients. And again, she delivered the same message. I've been sent here to give you a message that Jesus loves you. He cares about you. This is not what he had intended for your life to be an abortionist. Please stop. Now, I remembered what she said. But in the intervening year between those two visits, I had received at least 3 personal greeting cards, marked confidential, mailed to me at the office with the message on the card. One time during the intervening year, I arrived at my office and there was a plate of brownies on the desk with the message tied to the brownies. You have to do this in love. How long would you evangelize somebody who thought you were nuts? She did it for 7 years. I left my practice in 1980. There was a lot going on. Abortion had become a big thing. See, because when I stopped doing abortions, the partners understood. They knew what was going on. But when my wife and I got involved in the pro-life movement, whoa, that was not good. Because they felt it was putting a spotlight on them. And I left the practice. When I stopped doing abortions, it was very isolating. We lost every friend we had. Phones stopped ringing, the invitations dried up. But God was very gracious to us. He just filled the void with pro-life friends. And a lot of them, as I said, we were both raised Catholic, and so a Christian tradition was something we weren't familiar with. And he put so many people in front of us that were Christian models and helped us on that journey. I'll never forget, and as I said, it took a long time. I left the practice in 1980, and I was still speaking. I remember just a month or two after I left the practice, we were living in Albany, New York, upstate New York, and on a Saturday morning, I crossed the state line into Vermont, and I did a presentation in a high school gymnasium. Maybe 50 people showed up. And when it was over, this lovely lady, short again, in her 70s, comes up, very nice, chattering away at high speed. "Oh, thank you so much for giving the presentation. And isn't it beautiful what Jesus is doing in your life?" And I go, "Oh, God, another one." And I felt like a fraud. I didn't want this lady to think that I was something that I wasn't. So after what I hope was an eloquent presentation, I stammered like an idiot. "Well, ma'am, I don't feel about Jesus the way you do." I'll never forget. She stopped chattering. She looked up, got a big smile on her face, and she goes, "He knows you, sweetie. He's going to get you sooner or later." And she walked out. And he did. The minister who had brought us the last bit of that journey years later knew nothing of any of this. He'd just been around a long time. And he said, "In my experience, a lot of people help you on the road to Christ." He said, "Wouldn't it be nice to go back and thank them?" And the first one I thought of was Susan. She kept up her one-woman war for 7 years. Invited her out to lunch. And I found out at lunch something I didn't know before. She was one of those people picketing my office in 1983. And she said, we were around the office, and there was 5 doctors in the practice, and we all did abortions. She said, "But I got this feeling that I was supposed to come to you and give the message. And I kept doing it even though I know what you thought of me." She acted in faithfulness. That's what one person can do. There was another lady. We called her, she was in the pro-life group. We called her pro-life jack of all trades. If anything needed doing, she did it. Stuffing envelopes, whatever it was, she was there. She was a widow. But the thing she loved, she did 2 things in particular. She loved going into schools and giving presentations to students, a pro-life presentation, and she did that on a regular basis. The other thing was unusual. As I said, in Albany, there were 50 OBs doing abortions, but she picked one in particular, and I can't even tell you why she did. She just did. And she started praying for that doctor every single day by name. It's easy to pray for the moms. It's easy to pray for the babies. It's not so easy to pray for the doctors. But she did it. And she did something unusual. She found the name of that abortionist's wife and children, and she never spoke to them, but she prayed for them by name every single day. One day she was scheduled to go into school to do a presentation. She was sick as a dog. She tried to find a substitute, couldn't, so she dragged herself out of bed and she went in the class and she gave that presentation. It was a bunch of 8th graders, 13-year-olds. And that night, one of the little girls went home, and her parents, sitting around the dinner table, asked what we all ask our kids 1,000 times: "What did you do in school today?" And instead of giving the usual answer, "Nothing," this little girl was very impressed, and she told her parents about the presentation that this lady had given. And it must have impressed her, because she looked at her mom and dad and she said, "I can't understand how anyone could do that to a little baby," 13-year-old. Little did she know that her daddy was an abortionist. Not only that, but he was the abortionist that woman had been praying for. That little girl was the little girl she had been praying for by name, had no idea that child was sitting right in front of her. And that kid totally innocently witnessed to her daddy, who was so afraid his little girl would find out what he was doing, that he quit, and he never did another. So just how bad is it? Just how bad has it gotten? God bless you. I'm going to assume most of you live in California. I couldn't possibly live here. Sorry. But just how bad is it? There is a late-term abortion clinic in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 3 hours north of Las Cruces, where I relocated several years ago. And they do abortions pretty much anytime during pregnancy and pretty much for any reason. I'm going to show you a video, and this was shot inside the clinic by Live Action. Pay attention, there's a quiz at the end.
Dr. Boyd, Southwestern Women's Options. How may I help you?
Hi, I was hoping to schedule an abortion.
All right. What was your last period?
It was like the middle of May, so like May 15th, probably.
All right, so it looks like we can do this for you, but it is going to be a week-long procedure. So if you're able to come next week, and we start this on the 12th, I'm going to be looking at a fee of $8,000.
Oh.
Now, are you still in your chair?
Oh, just barely.
Just barely. But what you also need to keep in mind is that every week that goes by, the fee goes up by another $1,000.
Well, we get is at your 27 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
Yep. So you're about a month. Yeah, actually, you're about a month off in how you.
Oh, wow.
To insert the injection, it's going straight into the sac and to the pregnancy. Okay, it's bottom down. It'll insert through the baby's bottom. Okay.
Okay,
if
so
it's the head down, it'll be inserted through the head, through the cranium. If we can't catch it early enough, which it has happened. If you're feeling pressure, it's moving down or something coming out, the pregnancy coming out, then you'll want to unlock the door to the hotel room, get your cell phone, and just sit on the toilet. You don't have to look at anything. You don't have to clean anything up or nothing. Just be on the phone with us, and and you could stay on the phone with us until the doctor and nurse get there. Okay?
Oh, good. So just go in the toilet if I'm having labor. Okay.
Yeah.
And what if it does come out when I'm on the toilet?
Just, you don't gotta look down. You don't gotta do anything. The doctor and nurse will come take care of it. If you feel like it's too much to see any of it, then do not let yourself look at it.
Okay.
If you want to cover yourself, even with like a towel or something.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If you're one of those lucky people that has no pain with contractions and all of a sudden you're like, something's coming out, you sit on the toilet
Okay.
and you call us and you unlock the hotel room and we come in and we take care of you.
If I'm on the toilet and it pops out and it's in the toilet, what do I do?
You would just sit there and you would stay there.
Okay.
And you would not move until we come and get you.
Okay. I mean, I don't have to worry about
You don't have to
taking it out or anything.
You don't have to clean anything. You don't have to do anything.
Okay. You will do. Okay.
You get everything.
How much was this abortion? $8,000 for 25 weeks. She's 27. $10,000. $10,000. Now, I know most of you aren't doctors. Can anything happen to a woman in labor? Yeah. Her blood pressure could get out of control. She's over a 10% chance she'll hemorrhage, and I mean hemorrhage. All sorts of things can happen. That's why we have people in hospitals and labor rooms when they're in labor. But for $10,000, these caring physicians and nurses cannot afford to have somebody sit with this woman while she labors alone in a hotel room and delivers her dead son or daughter into a toilet. That is how bad it's gotten. On December 1st, last year, I was in front of the Supreme Court, along with 90 other pro-life obstetricians, gynecologists, and other physicians, because the Dobbs case was being argued inside the building. It is possible, maybe, Roe versus Wade will be overturned come June, maybe. I'm very cautious when I say that, because In the last 30 years of speaking, I have predicted more than once that I thought it was going to go down, and it never did. And it may not this time, but it could. But what changes in California if Roe versus Wade is gone? Zip, nada, nothing. This ends when enough people say enough. This ends when Christians in particular say, this is enough. You know the name Bernard Nathanson. You should read his biography. And he says, he started NARAL, National Abortion Rights Action League. He's one of the founders. And he says, way back then, in the early 70s, if the church had stood firm, this might have never happened. Well, it's not too late. But we need every one of you. It matters. You've been told, confessing ain't enough. It means nothing. It really does. I was invited to speak for the Catholic Medical Association about 5 years ago. And I was upset. And I gave a speech. I said a few things likely I'll never be asked back. It's okay. And I did something at that conference that I've never done since. And I was just moved to do it, but I'm going to do it now because it's important. I wish you could see me as I really am. I really do. In order to do that, I might be standing here in a red suit with a tail and a pitchfork. But that illusion of the devil is stupid. It really is. The name Lucifer means light. He's beautiful. Someone you want to be around. I love the movies. You know, the Dracula is a frequent character in the movies, isn't it? But Dracula, if you read the book, is not like Bela Lugosi being creepy. It's more like Frank Langella in 1979. He's seductive. He's beautiful. You want to be around him. But that's who I am. And I'm going to make you a deal. I'm going to give you social justice. I'm going to give you universal health care. I'm going to give you free and open borders so that people from Central and South America and the rest of the world can come to the United States and better provide for themselves and their families. I only ask two things in return, just two. One, I want 1 million of your children every year. Now, understand something. If you want to go to church, yell hallelujah. You want to bitch about the pro-life movement, or you want to bitch about abortion in church, feel free. You want to contribute to your local pregnancy center? That's good. I don't care. Because the only other thing I really require of you is when it matters. When it really, really matters. That when you walk into a voting booth, you vote for a pro-abortion politician. That's all I want. That's all I want. Your votes matter. They matter. Look at what, and beyond abortion, look at what's going on today. So I ask you not to just be upset, not to just be pro-life in your church. If you are moved to, help the Crisis Pregnancy Center. If you are moved to, talk to your doctor. Do they do abortions? You've got a relationship with that person. Now, I'm going to tell you some good news. I know this is a tough talk. But you realize, and I want to praise the pregnancy centers in this country, because they are making a difference, and they are saving thousands and thousands and thousands of children's lives. Do you realize that there are more crisis pregnancy centers in this country than there are abortion clinics? There are. And something that surprises people, and something, because I teach medical students, and it surprises the medical students. Did you realize that over 85% of obstetrician gynecologists refuse to do abortions. Absolutely refuse. And I work at a medical college, and I'm retired. I don't need to. I don't need the money. But I enjoy working with students. And I think it's also very important that being a pro-life physician, to be in front of these students. And we don't sit around and discuss abortion all day long. But it's important for them to see that they are not alone, because they feel alone. They are bombarded with this constantly, pushing them. You're talking about California mandating that students get training in abortion. I've testified in front of Congress against that very thing several years ago. It's not necessary. You can make a huge impact. You can save countless lives. You have no idea. Much of what you do, you'll never hear, not in this life, what you accomplished. But it can make all the difference in the world. Be pro-life outside of church. Be in front of the clinics. Be in front of the doctor's offices. Do it in love. Do it as a Christian. And you can have an impact that will ring, as they say, into the future. God bless you all, and thank you for your time.